Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving podcast. My name is Ashley. Today, I have with me a fourth-generation physician, Dr. Bill Rawls, who has dedicated his life to medicine. Now, this story, y'all, before I get into the full introduction, I am not exaggerating when I say my mind was blown during this conversation. It's just something that we don't talk a lot about, and I found it incredibly fascinating. So Dr. Rawls, when he was faced with a personal health crisis in his late 40s with Lyme disease, everything changed, as you can imagine. In his quest to regain his health, Dr. Rawls was confronted with the limitations of conventional medicine and knew he had to find his own path to restore wellness. And he talks about this shift in his life, and I found it incredibly fascinating, and how maybe similar to a lot of you, even myself, we don't expect to embark on these journeys, or we don't think we're going to, but then there's this thing sort of like pushing us towards it, and we're like, wow, yes, I was supposed to be here, or this happened to me because I was meant to be here. So for the past 15 years, Dr. Rawls has extensively studied the science behind herbal therapies and new sustainable approaches for protecting health. Today, Dr. Rawls shares the revelations that have helped him and thousands of others reclaim their lives. Dr. Rawls is a leading expert in integrative health and the medical director of Vital Plan, a holistic health and herbal supplement company in Raleigh, North Carolina. So shout out to our local people here. He is the best-selling author of Unlocking Lyme and his most recent book, The Cellular Wellness Solution: Tap into Your Full Potential with the Science-Backed Power of Herbs. During our conversation, we talk about what does cellular wellness actually mean. We talk about the different herbs that he recommends or some of his favorites. I don't know about you, but when I think about herbs, I think about basil and oregano and parsley. And we talk about how our modern farming practices have really stripped our diet of a lot of beneficial things like phytochemicals. And we talk about the application piece. We talk about his book. There's just so much in this conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rawls so he can explain everything to you. I hope that your mind is fascinated just as much as mine was with this conversation. Dr. Rawls, I'm so thrilled to have you here today. I can't wait to dive into your book and your journey and everything that you've been doing. So I would love for you
Pleasure.
to just tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how this led you to creating a book around cellular wellness.
Yeah, it's unexpected. When we start out on our journey that we call life, we never know what it's going to bring, and sometimes it brings unexpected turns. So I knew medicine; it was in my family, and I ended up going to medical school. But found even then in medical school that, a lot of things we did as far as medications and that sort of thing didn't necessarily make people well. So I gravitated more toward obstetrics and gynecology because it was a well population. Women tend to be much more sensitive about their health. And it was just really cool delivering babies. And it was exciting. I was practicing in a small town. I took call every second to third night. And oddly, back in the 80s and 90s, there was this idea that, do we really need sleep? So it was like, yeah, I can get by on 4 hours a night, and sometimes not at all. I'm tough. I can push through. And I did that, and I could get away with it in my 30s. Busy in the community, active with my family, and that's just really, really challenging job. By the end of my 40s, it started to catch up with me, and not having sleep for 15, 20 years, I just crashed. And everything started falling apart. And I didn't really understand it at the time. Because it wasn't just that I was sleepy and tired. I mean, I had arthritis, heart palpitations, chest pain, neurological symptoms. I mean, it was just everything. And most of my labs were relatively normal. So, it's kind of like, what's going on here? I identified first with fibromyalgia, like a lot of people with fibromyalgia. It's like, there's got to be something else there. And I kept searching and found that I was carrying some of the microbes associated with Lyme disease. That's not surprising. I spent my whole youth in the woods, got bitten by ticks all the time, but I didn't remember a specific tick bite. But still, that was enough to say, okay, antibiotics can make me well, you know? So I took antibiotics round after round, and they just made me sicker, and I just got worse.
Wow.
And along the way, like so many people, I started paying attention more to my diet. I ended up giving up the night call, which caused me to leave obstetrics and have to restructure my whole life and career. So I started adopting better health habits, but still I wasn't getting better. And I came upon an herbal protocol for chronic Lyme disease. And I was desperate by that point, just
Yeah.
absolutely desperate. It's like, okay, I think the potential for this to harm me is pretty low. Doesn't cost that much. I can get these herbs. These weren't herbs that you would find like in just a health food store. I was having to special order all these herbs. And I didn't really have high expectations. Nothing else works. The herbs probably aren't going to work, but what the heck? Let's give it a shot.
Yep.
They did. I started getting my life back. Now, that wasn't
Wow.
suddenly. And I understand now what was going on. At the time I thought, I'm killing the microbes. That's what the herbs are doing. It's the antimicrobial properties of these special herbs that are killing these microbes in my system. Now I understand what was going on was they were suppressing not only these microbes that I thought I had, these bacteria associated with Lyme disease. What I'm finding is that that chronic illness is association with reactivation of all kinds of microbes, and we're seeing this with long COVID, reactivation of Epstein-Barr and all these things. So what we're seeing, I think, is just scratching the surface. Basically, we have a lot bigger microbiome that extends into our blood and tissues, and there's a lot going on in there. And that's been where I've studied recently. So the herbs are doing that. But more importantly than anything else, the herbs were strengthening my cells. And that's what health is all about. We are beings of cells. All living things, those are made of cells. And if you feel healthy, if you feel well, it's because your cells are well and they're all working in synergy to make you work. And when we're ill, it's because our cells are stressed and cellular functions aren't coordinated. So when you talk about hormones and that sort of thing, that's just cells talking to one another and coordinating their functions. And if our hormones are messed up, cells aren't talking to one another, everything starts breaking down. So the herbs were restoring that. They were bringing me back to a normal state of health. And it took time. It took 3 to 5 years of taking the herbs. But even after that, I considered myself, hey, I've gotten to the point where I'm well now. Things are good. So I would stop ordering the herbs, and things would go, and some stress would come along, and I would start having symptoms again. And I finally said, I'm not having any side effects of these herbs. I feel better when I'm on them. I'm just going to keep taking them. So now I've been taking herbs for 15 years or more.
Wow.
I'm 65. I gave up other kinds of things. I was diagnosed with essential hypertension when I was in my 30s. My blood pressure is normal. My cholesterol is normal. My blood sugar is normal. I'm doing things like kite surfing and a lot of stuff that people my age don't get to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, diet's part of it. I'm picky about that. I'm picky about my sleep, all of that sort of thing. But I think the herbs take me to a level that you just can't achieve otherwise.
And is that kind of what you mean when you say cellular level? Is like a lot of times we go to the doctor and we have these symptoms and we're given a prescription or something like that. But it sounds like you're really trying to dig and find the root cause at a cellular level, not just at the surface.
Yeah. It's a big deal. When you start taking health, wellness, understanding the human body down to the cellular level, you change the conversation. And that's one of the things that is missing in our conventional medical system. We basically treat our body like it's a car, and we compartmentalize. So we've got cardiologists and pulmonologists and gastroenterologists, and so we treat these individual parts. And, when someone has a symptom, we address those symptoms or those manifestations of illness with drugs or surgical procedures, which has value. It can stabilize a bad situation or suppress illness. But what it doesn't do is address cellular stress, which is the root cause of all illness, right? So we are artificially blocking symptoms. We are artificially blocking manifestations or processes of illness, but we're not addressing the underlying cause of the illness. So that's something I started looking at to say, okay, and it gets complicated, because we have a lot of different cells in the body and so many different processes. There are thousands of different illnesses and just as many drugs and all these complicated pathways. When you take it down to the cellular level, it's pretty easy, because if you're taking care of one cell in the body, you're taking care of all the cells in the body. And cells need good nutrition. They need a clean, contaminant-free environment. They need downtime for sleep to recover from stress. They need good blood flow from exercise, and they need some protection against all kinds of invasive microbes. So if you're doing that for any cells in the body, you're doing it for everything. So you can take care of your heart and your brain and your muscles and your joints all at one time, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage that this kind of thinking does. And that's the difference in drugs and herbs. So when you look at this thing, drugs are designed to artificially block processes. They're in essence low dose, therapeutically dosed poisons that we are poisoning pathways. So, we in a way, in some way, block some of those manifestations of illness. But we're not addressing the stress factors, bad food, toxins, all of these things that stress our cells and cause us to become chronically ill. So when you start doing that, eating a better diet, cleaning up your environment, getting the rest that you need, getting the exercise you need, you start creating an environment of cellular health in your body, and your cells start coordinating functions, and your hormones normalize, and everything starts working again. So what the herbs are doing is they're compounding that. And when I say herbs, what we're talking about is the complex chemistry that we call phytochemistry of the herb. So all living organisms are made of cells. So plants are made of cells too. Plants have to protect their cells from free radicals and radiation and toxic substances and every form of microbe. So plants have a chemical system of cellular protection, and they use a lot of the same chemical messengers that we do to coordinate cellular functions. So when we take an herb, we're basically taking the plant's defense and regulatory system that enhances anything that we're doing. Now, herbs, there's a pretty broad spectrum of herbs, and there's some herbs that have chemicals that are very drug-like, and some plants that have chemicals that don't mesh with us, like nobody would want to eat poison ivy. But these other herbs, so many herbs that have this protective function, that what they're doing is protecting cells. So the herbs that I was taking, they were suppressing microbes, but they were protecting my cells from free radicals and toxic substances and, things that we do with a bad diet and not getting sleep. So I was getting all this robust extra protection in my life. And that was enhancing my recovery. It was giving me what I needed. So it basically promotes healing. And that's what's missing with our drugs. When I was a physician, I knew that no matter how good my drug choices were or how good my surgical skills were, if the patient had lost the ability to heal, then things weren't going to go well. So drugs really have no capacity to promote healing. So what healing is the ability of cells in the body to recover from stress, to regenerate and repair internal damage. So when we're protecting cells from stress with all this complex herbal phytochemistry, we are promoting healing.
Mm.
So drugs don't promote healing. Herbs promote healing. Healing takes time, so you have to be patient. All these things are going to take time. That cellular recovery takes time to get going. So that's why it took me a while to get well. But I found that maintaining that, so I don't take the robust selection of herbs that I once did, but just taking a handful of capsules every day gives me the edge, that gives me a resilience at my age that I don't think I would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting, really just studying all of this stuff.
Yeah, that is exciting. And first of all, I really do appreciate you saying that this journey wasn't something that happened overnight for you. It took you 3 to 5 years to really not just learn, but also heal yourself in a way. And I think that's just a great reminder for all of us listening that, drugs are great and they have their place, and it's more of a band-aid versus something that takes a little bit more time. Cause like you said, you're getting at the cellular level, which isn't something that you can do in a day or overnight.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my missions, is just kind of bringing all this together. So the doctors are going, oh, we don't trust herbs. And the herbalists going, we don't trust drugs. And I'm looking at it and going, their answer is kind of somewhere in between. It's like a
Yeah.
hybrid. Our medical therapies are so important for stabilizing the body when it's in a really desperate situation, and reducing symptoms like sleep, bad sleep, and pain. Early on, that can be really important. But if you're just relying on that acute intervention to manage chronic illness, the person never ends up being well. So a lot of people look at herbs as being weak versions of drugs or low dose drugs. And really what I'm looking at is apples and oranges. These things are two very different things, and they can be used in a complementary fashion to really get extraordinary results.
Yeah. How was that shift for you? I'm curious, as a conventionally trained MD in the US, to kind of shifting to more of various practices that I imagine you did not learn in school. How was that for you? Was there any pushback maybe from family or coworkers?
I don't think my father, who was a physician, ever completely understood me, but that's okay. I think he respected that I was different. I was a little bit already there, because when I was in medical school, just seeing the fact that people never got well on medical therapies, it just seemed to be this thing that we were just basically keeping people alive and allowing them to function, but not getting them to a state. And I was very frustrated with that. And that was one of the things that pushed me toward obstetrics and gynecology. And I think it is for a lot of people that go into that particular field. Not to knock my medical colleagues, but for me, I wanted something a little bit different. And I don't know, sometimes you just feel like life is pushing you in a direction, and I never anticipated the things that were going to happen to me. But I look back on it, even though there were some pretty miserable times, and I go, yeah, that was what I was supposed to do in life. Those were choices that were being made before I even went to medical school.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just don't realize things that are happening to you really matter. But part of my recovery from chronic Lyme, fibromyalgia, whatever you want to call it, was I can remember being at different stages of going, why is this happening to me? And having a lot of anger and just being totally frustrated, to gradually shifting to, okay, I'm paying attention now. What am I supposed to be learning here? So bring it on, and I became kind of my own guinea pig within reason. I wasn't doing crazy things or stupid things, but I I was using my situation to learn about herbs and really learn about them from a different way. I studied all of the herbal traditions, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, and everything else. But I kept coming back to this idea of, what I'm comfortable with is this more Western scientific point of view of, what is this complex chemistry of the herb? How is that interacting with our physiology and our cellular functions to create these effects that we're seeing from them? And that helped me understand the thing better. And so when I'm looking at traditional herbalism of, which is mostly observational of, a person has this presentation or these symptoms and these are the herbs that we use. I'm wanting to know, okay, how are those herbs working? Why, how is that phytochemistry of that herb affecting cellular processes to achieve those results? Because every herb has a little bit different characteristic, and that depends on the environment where the plant's natural environment. So, there are a lot of different environments on Earth, so plants can't move. They're kind of stuck where they are. And so the chemistry of the plant is going to reflect how it's dealing with particular stress factors, particular toxins, particular microbes in that particular environment. So different herbs are going to have different effects. And the cool thing is when you blend or combine different herbs, you get this wonderful synergy. So typically most herbal preparations are formulas that include 5 or more herbs because we want that synergy that comes with the herb.
Okay. And I know that a lot of us know herbs as basil, oregano, the typical things that we can find at a grocery store. Could you maybe
Right.
just explain to us maybe what kind of herbs you're talking about? Maybe some ones that you're particularly fond of?
Of course, that we'll start with the culinary herbs. And one of the things that I try to do in my recent book, is really help people understand herbs from a different way. So we're talking about this complex phytochemistry of the plant, and that is variable from plant to plant. So starting at one end, you've got food plants. And our food plants do have this complex chemistry that can be very good for us. Broccoli, celery, all of our different vegetables have wonderful phytochemistry. But the problem with our food is that through cultivation, we've cultivated our food plants to produce calories, not protective phytochemicals. So we're not getting that robust phytochemistry that you would find in a wild plant. And we've cultivated them under very controlled, basically stress-free conditions. We don't want to stress our food plants. We want them to produce lots of calories. Well, that's come at the expense of our food plants just don't have this robust protective phytochemistry anymore. Not to say that you shouldn't eat vegetables. I think, one of my qualifications for a good, healthy diet should be half vegetables. Really, really important. But you just don't get it. Now, one step over from that are the culinary herbs. Culinary herbs basically are still in their wild state. We haven't cultivated them to produce calories. When you look at basil and oregano and the other spices, you're not getting any calories from that. All you're getting is flavor. And it happens to be that the phytochemistry of those plants is really nice. They create pleasant flavors. They are powerhouses of protection. So when you're putting herbs in your food, you're getting antimicrobial properties and antioxidants and things that neutralize toxins and all this really great stuff. But it's hard to get the amount that you would really want, or possibly that we would find in our ancient forage food diet. So then you've got your definition of medicinal herbs. And in my opinion, the biggest difference between a culinary herb and the medicinal herbs is that the medicinal herbs tend to be bitter and they don't have great flavor, so we don't typically add them to food. And I think that's the only difference. My theory was, as we were giving up that forage food diet that had a lot of vegetables and phytochemistry in it for cultivated foods, especially grains, we kept that tradition. We recognized that it was important. So we kept the ones that tasted good as culinary herbs, and we used the other ones as medicine. But we kept that tradition that was so important. When you think about it, our culinary herbs, we use them for flavor, but their real purpose was preventing spoilage. And that comes from the antimicrobial properties of the herbs. So you look at all those herbs and spices, they were really, really precious because they kept food longer. They prevented spoilage, which is from bacteria. So that's the big thing that they were doing. And it just happened to be that, the ones that we liked that actually tasted good, we kept using. But that medicinal herb tradition, we retained otherwise, and we use those more in a medicinal form, capsules, tinctures, things like that. And in that span, you've got all the way from the herbs that I predominantly use just for their protective properties, all the way up to the other end of the spectrum, where you do have some herbs that have some strong drug-like properties, some that would even be defined as poisons. And they were not used very much in traditional herbal therapy. Those became our drugs.
Fascinating. And so I know that you talk about this a lot, not just in the book, but just in general, how our modern farming practices have stripped us, like you had mentioned, of a lot of these phytochemicals. And so how can we, and kind of similar to what you're doing, and I appreciate this about your book too, because there is a lot of application, because I think when we're talking about medicinal herbs, it can feel really overwhelming. Even grocery store herbs can feel overwhelming sometimes and how to use them. So how can we maybe start adding them back into our diet, or what are maybe some things that you talk about in your book without giving too much away about how to apply these to our own lives?
Yeah, it's well, one of the things that I do in the book was just start with a core of herbs that are really safe for anyone to take. And what I list in the book is an herb called rhodiola, which is an adaptogen. And just to illustrate, we kind of cross the line. Not all herbs are things that we define as herbs or plants. We tend to just throw our medicinal mushrooms in there too. So mushrooms are fungi, but they have all these protective chemicals just like plants do. And like plants, there are some mushrooms that are poison and some mushrooms that can save your life and make your life wonderful. So reishi mushroom is a favorite. That's a shelf mushroom. If you go walking in the woods and see a mushroom growing on the side of the tree that's kind of rust colored and rainbow looking, that's a reishi. And they grow all over the world. They have really some strong anti-cancer properties. And I like turmeric. It's a wonderful anti-inflammatory. A few other herbs. Go-to cola is great for your brain. Milk thistle, really important for protecting your liver, because we all are we're just really assaulted with toxic substances in our world now more than ever before. And milk thistle protects those liver cells. So different herbs protect different groups of cells in the body, some better than others. So when you take that blend again, you get this robust cellular protection throughout your body. So just starting with a core of herbs that have low potential for drug-like effects, that have these healing properties, is really wonderful way just to incorporate that into your life. And then, as if you have other issues, chronic stress, brain issues, things like that, you can bring in other kinds of herbs. And I talk about that in a good bit in the book. But just starting with that core, that's going to do you a lot of good right there. So just that daily combination of taking just a handful of herbs, you get a lot more phytochemistry with an herbal product. You have to think about this thing. Humans, for hundreds of thousands of years, ate a forage food diet, and they ate roots and tubers and leaves and stems, and there wasn't very much calorie in that. So they had to eat a lot of it. And these were wild plants. So they were getting tons and tons of phytochemistry. So our history is having lots of plant phytochemistry. And we can get some of that in our diet. That's again one of my qualifications for a healthy diet. You ought to be eating more vegetables than anything else, but it's hard to get it. So kind of best of both worlds. In our modern world, we can get herbal supplements that just make it more consistent. So you can get these things on a daily basis to get that regular protection. So several ways to get them. You can do herbal tinctures, which they basically take the plant and put it in water and alcohol, and that pulls all that chemistry out of the plant. And then you discard the plant part, so you're not getting just a bunch of fiber. So tinctures are nice, but they do have a strong bitter flavor with a lot of our medicinal herbs. So I tend to use powdered standardized extracts. So basically they take a tincture, spray it on a surface, dry off the water and alcohol, and collect the powder, which is that really concentrated phytochemistry, and put it in a capsule. So standardized means that we have taken some key chemical and standardize that preparation, so we know the potency of it, compared to just kind of getting a bunch of herbs and drying them and putting it in a powder, which that's what your cheaper supplements are. So good standardized, and it'll say on the bottle, it'll tell you standardized to X amount of a certain phytochemical in the preparation, and you're getting a better quality product. It's also a lot more concentrated, and so that's a really nice way. So even 3 or 4 capsules a day can give you, especially if you're eating a healthy diet and doing all these things that you should be doing anyway for your health, taking that just as a minimum can give you a lot of extra protection. Now, at age 65, I'm taking about a dozen capsules a day, and you just kind of get used to it. And I just do that once a day. I was taking a lot more when I was in that recovery phase, but that keeps me going, and it really makes a huge difference in my life.
Yeah, it sounds like it really has just made a remarkable difference in your life, and I can tell in reading parts of your book and just in what you promote online that this is something that you're incredibly passionate about, and you're trying to spread the message so that other people can learn about this as well. And that's another thing that I appreciate about your book is you do kind of lay out a roadmap in a way for us to follow, especially if we're newer to using herbs as medicine, using medicinal herbs. And I really do appreciate that because it's a lot easier to follow than maybe what you could find online.
Yeah. Yeah. We use that word medicinal and medicine. I honestly don't even think of them that way. It's kind of like,
Mm,
this is just really essential for me to survive,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't really think of them as I'm taking this medicine to treat this thing anymore. It's more like, yeah, this is just part of what keeps me at my peak. And it's a real gift to be 65 and going, yeah, I'm at my peak here, and I've got a long way to go. I've got a lot more to contribute.
Yeah.
So it's really fun.
Yeah, that is the one thing that came up, and I'm kind of curious about your response is kind of the difference between like taking a multivitamin and these types of herbs. Is there something that you would recommend, just in your training and your experience?
I think a lot of people don't really look at the difference between an herb and a vitamin. And even, you go to a health food store and it's all just kind of a hodgepodge. They're all thrown together. And again, we talked about herbs and drugs being very different. Herbs and vitamins are just as much different. So what we're talking about with a vitamin is it being a nutrient. So nutrients are things that cells need to function. All right. So all the cells in the body need something to burn to make energy, carbohydrate, fat. They need amino acids to build proteins. And they need cofactors in the form of minerals and vitamins to make all of the enzymes and basically the innards, the working parts of the cell work. So they're nutrients that cells have to have. So cells are constantly wearing out parts, turning over parts, and having to rebuild them. So we need a constant supply so the cell can just keep rebuilding itself and keep doing its job. So some nutrients are for energy. Some nutrients are raw materials for whatever the cell does, like a thyroid cell is producing thyroid hormones. Well, it needs iodine and certain amino acids to make thyroid hormone. That's its job. So cells that are contracting muscles need a little bit different spectrum of nutrients to do their job. And we need a steady supply of those things. So cells are constantly needing nutrients and turning things over. So when you look at a multivitamin, especially if your body is under stress, like chronic illness, giving vitamins and minerals can be beneficial just to increase that supply. But you have to be careful with it because it's like vitamin E. We typically use one form. There are at least 7 and probably many more different forms of vitamin E. And the body uses these different forms in different ways. And typically a lot of synthetic multivitamins, we're getting one form that can often be useless to our cells. So if you're taking a multivitamin, it's really important to take one that's in the natural forms that the body can utilize, which really isn't most vitamin products on the market. The other thing you have to think about, the classic one a day that started back in the 40s and 50s, we're dumping all those nutrients in all at one time. And cells can't use them that way. They can take up a little bit of that, but it's not like they can just, suck those things in and store them. Cells aren't used to that. They're used to vitamins coming from our food. So if we're eating a healthy diet, we're continually supplying those nutrients that our cells need. So yeah, a vitamin is okay, but there hasn't been a whole lot of research demonstrating that they have that much value. Recently, there was one that showed that people that were at risk or had dementia could benefit a little bit. So if cells are really stressed, yeah, they're important. So herbs are non-nutritive. They don't have vitamins, they don't have minerals, they don't have carbohydrates, fats. Their whole thing is protecting the cell. And here's something really important. If you are protecting your cell from stress and your cells are less stressed, nutrient demand goes down because they're not working as hard, they're not turning over as many parts, and they're not taxing or burning their mitochondria quite as hard. So in a way, when you take herbs, you're decreasing that nutrient demand so that you will utilize what's coming from your food better. So in my mind, taking a complex of herbs every day is far better than taking a multivitamin.
Wow. This is fascinating. I mean, this is blowing my mind just because I think a lot of us and people even listening, we follow a predominantly plant-based diet and we think like, oh, we're eating in a way that supports our cells, but we kind of forget that our cells are exposed to things all day long beyond food, and that stresses them out. And so to really go above and beyond to do in a way what you're talking about and really try to get at the cellular level with herbs
Right.
can really be life-changing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's tough because we don't think that way. We've been trained to think as a whole, more like the body's a car
Yep.
and we have to tune it up. And it's not like that. I mean, it's like I talk about this from time to time that when you look, you can always simplify things, the understanding of something by taking it down to its smallest functional unit. So when you look at a car, the smallest functional unit is the car. Your smallest functional unit of a cell phone is the cell phone. The smallest functional unit of a 747 is the 747. And if parts of those units break, then you have to go in and fix those things because they can't fix themselves. So think about the body. Smallest functional unit is this microscopic cell. So it means that the heart isn't a unit by itself. It's a conglomeration of all of these units. So the beauty of that is you can lose cells, and we typically are shedding cells. We do wear cells out, but we can replace cells, and that's constantly going on. So the body keeps right on working. And every cell in the body has this remarkable ability to repair itself, which there are really no man-made things that can do that to the level of a cell. And then when they do finally burn out, we can regenerate new cells. And of course, there's a limit to that. All cells eventually lose the ability. They basically burn out their mitochondria and they wear out. So, aging is the process of losing functional cells. But wow, having that cellular function gives us a resilience that no man-made device will ever have.
Yeah.
And it's really pretty cool when you think about it.
It is very cool. And I appreciate your passion. I appreciate the way you talk about it too. I feel like it's really, in a way, easy to understand, easy to follow. And I think your book really outlines things really well too, where someone who, like myself, who doesn't really know much about herbs, hasn't done really the research, it's really easily laid out so that we can follow it if it's something that we want to get into. I think it's fascinating. I mean, this whole conversation is just, to me, it's next level because it takes plant-based eating, which I'm incredibly passionate about, just to a whole new level when we're thinking about the cellular level.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the whole idea. I mean, it took some work getting there, but
I'm sure.
but once you get it, once you start thinking about the body as cells, it changes everything about our understanding and what we should be doing for ourselves. And so it's really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this information that I really do believe is invaluable. So where can people connect with you more or learn more about you, and where can they find your book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon, of course. It's called The Cellular Wellness Solution. It's a big book. Don't be intimidated there. It's really 4 books in one. So 1 is just talking about that cellular concept. 2 is talking about understanding herbs and herbal phytochemistry in a different way than most people have come to appreciate it. The third part is really defining how we should be taking care of ourselves from an environment and diet and lifestyle point of view. And then the fourth part is taking those principles and applying them to specific areas like cardiovascular or gastrointestinal. So there's a lot of information in the book. So it's on Amazon. It's there. We also have a website, Cellular Wellness, that's got some more information. We're still building that out. And I am medical director at our supplement company, vitalplan.com. So I do a lot of writing through that. There's a lot of information that we release, plus having, we try to have exceptional level products and pathways for people to really adopt all those things. And the book is for sale there also. So that's vitalplan.com.
Okay, wonderful. And if someone is interested in getting supplements as well, is that the best place for them to do it?
Yes, I think there are a lot of great companies out there. What we try to do is make that buying process easy by we do multiple levels of testing. I can assure you our supplements are some of the cleanest in the industry as far as being free of contaminants and really defining the quality and concentration that people need to get benefit. But taking that and carrying people through pathways of not just taking a bunch of supplements, but also how do you pair that with the other things in life that you need to do to really optimize your health.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Rawls, thank you again for everything. I really appreciate you coming on. I just feel like this conversation was absolutely incredible. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk.
absolutely. You're so welcome. Well, thank you again, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
Until next time, keep thriving.